Hello.
Welcome
Welcome
back
to
to the Venus Report.
Hit It Right on the Money. Barely. Cool.
Awesome.
How you doing, Kate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I am sitting here with coffee. It is rainy, cloudy out here. Is it cloudy where you are?
Really?
Yeah.
No, it's really sunny. That's so
Really?
weird. So we live like 45 minutes from each other, but not very different weather, like at all. That's really weird.
Right. I feel like there's something having the like I feel like once you enter the state of Massachusetts, it's just like, oh, you never know. It's like
You
rainy,
never know what's gonna happen.
sunny. Yeah, I don't know.
Mm. Okay, so today we are talking about all about career and relationships in astrology and how to interpret your birth chart.
With all of that, yes, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too.
We're kind of gonna use our own placements slash experience with career relationships. As you guys probably know, Kate and I are in what we like to call we're on in the process of building aligned careers, and that
Hmm.
can also look different to other people who might just have a job just to pay the bills and just get it done. That's totally cool. That is definitely something that people can do, and that's totally fine. So, but yeah, we're gonna focus a little bit on Venus, which kind of gives way to this
Mm.
aligned career thing that we're talking about.
So when you look at a birth chart, first of all, it's a big circle, and you can think of it as a snapshot of the sky when you were born and the planets and their placements in the sky or the solar system. So there's 12 sections of a birth chart. Every single section means a certain thing in an area of your life. These are called houses. And you can see in a birth chart whether or not you have planets in each house. So there's 12 houses. You most likely don't have planets in each one, and that is totally normal. Empty houses basically just mean that there's no influence in that area of your life. So in ancient astrology, back in the Egyptian times, BCE times, the Egyptian astrologers or Babylonian astrologers appointed specific areas of life to a section of sky according to where they were on Earth and how they can see the sections of the sky. Because what they observed was when certain planets would enter into this section of the sky, specific things would happen. And everybody is in different places on Earth. So, depending on your vantage point on planet Earth, you have like a different uh, houses that planets are in. So, if that makes sense. But interpreting a birth chart in general, what I usually start with is I look at it like a T or like a cross in the middle of the chart. So there's an important line that goes from the top of the chart, the MC, to the bottom of the chart, which is the IC, the uh, midheaven, and the ilium coli, which is where the bottom of the earth is and the top of the sky. And if you have planets right at the top of your chart, they're just significant to your work out in the world, right? Really significant. If you have planets at the bottom of your chart, it's like how you experience home and where you come from, your roots, even past lives. So I like to look at that axis first, the north and south basically axis, because it speaks to what this person is focused on in this life. And I know for me, for example, I have a lot of planets around in and around my MC, which is the top of my chart, and my life is so outwardly focused in a way that like I want to put work into the world. I'm very much focused on my career rather than having a family right now, and I'm like that age where everyone I know is having kids. So that's how I interpret, like that's how I see my life. Then I would look at the axis of the ascendant, the rising sign, and the descendant. So the ascendant is the horizon, the sign that was on the horizon exactly when you were born. The descendant is the sign um, that was on the sunset side when you were born. Does that make sense?
Western, yeah.
The western side. Yeah. So then you can see the person's rising. The rising sign is, I think, really important because it says who you are in the world. And and of who you like innately already are. So I'd look at those 4 points, and then I would obviously look at the sun and moon. So you get the big three: sun, moon, and rising. I would look at where the house, I usually look at like what houses planets are in first. And at the same time, I'm looking at the where the planets are located in the chart. I see if there's any significant aspects. And aspects are just angles that the planets are either talking to or facing each other. And those are square, sextile, trine, conjunction, and opposition. That's where I would start.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, so I feel like that really covered a lot. Um, there's obviously just like approaches to it that can sometimes come up even live, like while you're looking at a chart that might not be kind of like the process that you normally do. Like for instance, if you're someone who looks at the planets first, but then you see someone's chart and you are like, wow, this chart has a grand trine. I need to look at that first. That's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what can happen for me. But I guess like my first approach to looking at a birth chart is the major aspects. I think that if someone, and I think it also depends on like the goal of the person who wants their reading done, right? So if they're like, okay, why, if someone is coming to us with like a challenge, I would kind of like focus on aspects. Or if someone is just like, yeah, like tell me about like why am I so interested in this right now? Then I would like look at transits and see where Venus is and where transiting Venus, like all those things. So I would say the first thing for me is probably aspects because those can be. I think aspects are the driver for people to actually seek out astrology in general because I think people who
Wait.
have challenging aspects who
Mm,
don't know about astrology seek guidance because they have these challenging aspects in their that just play out in their lives and they have no idea like why something is so challenging when it's easy for somebody else or when something easy just like something comes very easy to them they want to know why,
mm,
right? So
mm-hmm.
I would say that's number one. Number two is sun, moon, and rising, like you said, like just looking to where these major planets, probably the most strong personality planets are. And rising sign is not a planet, but it's a place in your chart, like we said, the eastern horizon. And another thing that is probably just good to note is like the very middle of your chart is Earth, right? Like I feel like a lot of people might look at birth charts and kind of like forget that, but like it's like we're all coming from the aspect of Earth. If we are able to go on Mars one day and have communities on Mars, then it's going to be a whole different story because then Earth is going to be a planet that we have placements in, right? So basically it's all coming from the aspect of Earth and we're looking out into the sky. So yeah, sun, moon, rising would be the next thing because it's just core values, your core sense of being. What like do you have aspects to these things? Because those are probably the most predominant. That's what I would do next. And then I would kind of look to the other personal planets, the Venus, Mars, and Mercury placements, because those things I think give context to your sun and moon and rising, but it's more nuanced. It's like more. It's like that. That's what makes you like very just different than somebody else who has the same sun and moon as you. You know, like you. That's why a lot of people. That's where another thing where people get caught in the astrology thing of like, well, I have the same placements as somebody I know, and we're so different. I would be like, well, look to their Mars, Venus, and Mercury because it's probably all different. And then yeah, lastly, I would say the way that I go from here is really diving into like I guess I do focus on the personal planets a little bit more because I think that is more telling of who somebody is, like the self, like Aries half of the year, and then the outer planets like Saturn and Uranus and Neptune I feel like give way to more like longer standing experiences in life that maybe just like are subtle, I guess more subtle. But then, of course, when you have Saturn opposing your sun, you're gonna notice it because it's powerful. But yeah, I would dive into planets, where they're placed. If Mars is in Cancer, I'm like, okay, where's the moon? Because the moon is ruled by Cancer. Is the moon in a challenging place? Because that will affect your Mars, right? So it's just like this weird, like, what's that called? Not tic tac toe. It's just this weird like thing where you just draw influence from everything in your chart
Mm,
and connect it to things so that you get more out of your interpretation.
that's great.
Yeah.
Couple questions. So you mentioned challenging aspects. What would you say an example of a challenging aspect would be?
Yeah. Well, with aspects, there are like known challenging aspects, which are oppositions, squares. And is there one more?
I
No.
don't think so.
Oppositions and squares. So that's mainly I feel like what we focus on. And an opposition is like, I think we've said this before, but it's kind of like just you're the opposite of me and we're talking, but like you're just not, you're the opposite of me. So anything that we try to do together is just going to be like too like polarized, right? A square is a little bit more, I feel like squares are a little bit more nuanced in a way, because they're dealing with the same modal cardinal signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs. So there's something similar between things as they're squared to each other, but they're also not the same. But they have like what's it called? Clashing personalities or something. Like there's something that's too similar but different. So like it's just it clashes because there's like, for instance, like Cancer is square to Aries. So like they're both cardinal signs, and I feel like cardinal signs probably feel this a lot because it's like we're leaders and we want to like make headway and like really just
Mm,
streamline things. But if you're with another person who also has that with you, like it could just be a little bit harder to like navigate. So that's just, I guess, an example of what I would say for squares,
mm.
oppositions,
Eh,
challenging aspects.
yeah. I have one example of a challenging aspect. Me and my partner are square our suns. So I'm a Scorpio sun. He's an Aquarius sun. And
Mm,
it's interesting because we obviously have other planets in our charts, but we clash because we're both fixed signs. He's
mm-hmm.
fixed air and fixed water. So there's like this mental and emotional tension that like we both when we're in those things of our personalities, there's like this disagreement happening. And I will say that squares can be a headway or a precursor to like major transformation and
Mm,
incredible accomplishment
yeah.
and stability. Because when you think of a square, say there's like a square around my head right here, and Aquarius is here, Scorpio is here, we're building something. When we're talking, we're building this way and we're building up and we're creating the finishing of the square. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
you can think of how squares work in the energy of the whole shape. So, with squares, they're challenging and they are a precursor to stability and incredible building of systems.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
would say that too. And it's cool
yeah.
that you said that about aspects, like, because now I'm thinking about like a triangle and like the grand trine you see in someone's chart, like that. It seems easy because it's just like, it's simple. I don't know, like compared to a square, it's just like
It's
simple and you
flowy.
can, yeah, it's flowing.
In
Yes.
in in sacred geometry, the triangle represents like flow because there's
Yeah.
just like it's flow. So a grand trine, just for people who are listening and don't know what that is, it's when you have planets that are all trine each other. So it creates a big triangle in the chart, and you'll see it. If on astro.com it shows up, trines show up as blue. So it'll be one big blue triangle. And
Mm.
if you have two planets trine each other, then they're on like this side of the chart. And also something you can picture or look at is the release point. If you have just two planets trine each other and not a grand trine, so that's just
Mm.
two, whatever sign is across would complete that triangle is the release point of that harmony, which I
Oh,
find so
wow. Yeah.
interesting. This is something I heard
Wow.
from Deborah Silverman. It really is into like release points, and you can look at it with trines, with sextiles, I think, but like the release point, and it's like what sign would complete that harmonization, and like
Wow.
lean into that energy to like complete it. So
That's
that's cool.
really, that's really, really cool. You just reminded me very quickly of
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of Nightlight Astrology, Adam Ellenboss, his podcasts. He was saying like studies ancient astrology, and there's this thing that can happen with planets transiting where like I think we went through one maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, but Venus was in a like enclosure with Saturn. So basically, I forget the term he said, but it was something about the malefics. If there's two malefics, meaning Saturn and Mars, like around Venus or aspecting like a benefic, Venus and Jupiter are examples of that. If they're like enclosing them or like doing some sort of aspect that encloses Venus, Venus can like come out differently and like express herself in like a way that's just like different. And I found that so interesting because then it's like I would want to know, it's hard to tell because transits are so like moving, but if you're born with that, I just wonder how that would come out. Like
Mm,
it's very interesting to me.
I feel like, yeah, if you had Venus right in between Mars and Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
your the way that you like express love, your values would be like rooted in a sense of structure, but like action, and it would just be like it's interesting to see those planets play out. Maybe your Venus
Yeah.
would be like really strong, and everything you do would be reflective of your Venus.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Especially if it was in like a aspect of your chart that was like powerful. Yeah.
Hmm.
That
Um,
would be really
okay,
interesting.
great. So, yeah, I wanted to move into like following my intuition, just again about reading charts, about approaching a birth chart. When I do a reading, um, I wanted to talk a little bit about listening to my intuition and like when I intuitively see something in the chart, mentioning it as important. And this also has to do with building aligned careers. So I think I have a question for you first.
Mm.
Um, how do you intuitively feel um, into your intuition? I guess that's a redundant question. How do you feel into your intuition and how do you trust it when talking about your career and maybe with interpreting birth charts because they're kind of similar?
Yeah. Oh my God. I really love that question. So I think it really just comes down to trial and error for me. Like, okay, so that's answering the sureness, like the way that I'm sure about things. I'm unfortunately like one of those people that like I have to see it to believe it, and I have to kind of like I kind of have to experience things the hard way, as like a parent would say. Like, I like to experience things like full on, and I think that's where I get my sense of intuition when it comes to career, because I was always like growing up in the career path that I was in, always following what I thought was right. Even if someone was like, "Well, like that's a really tough industry to get into and like you just never know." And like I just was like, "Well, cool, but like I just have to experience it. Like I have to." So I would like, but I think that that was my intuition being like, well, you just don't have a choice here. Like, we're going to do this. And I was just like, okay, like, let's do it. But I understand that what you're asking is more so like, how did I determine that? So it's hard for me because I feel like I kind of always from high school knew what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to like get into music. I applied to an audio engineering program and didn't get in. So I did entertainment management, but like, I knew already what I wanted, so I think right there I had an advantage. But for somebody who doesn't know and is like past beyond college and still is kind of like figuring it out, it's similar to me because I went into something and didn't like it, so I had to shift, and I was like, I like it was at a point where I was like, I don't even know, like I don't know. But I think it was more so the things that helped me were meditating, for sure, because even if you're not intentionally meditating to have clarity on your career, it still will give you clarity in your whole body. And that is what matters, I think, when you are like determining what to do next. And just paying attention to what you like, which is like very Venus. It's like pay attention to what catches your eye and like don't ignore it, even if it seems weird or like way out there for you and you just don't, you're just like that seems too scary. Like just lean into it because there are levels, you know, like you don't have to go all in on something and like be a celebrity in what you do. Like you don't have to. There's ways that you can create your life totally custom to what you want. And I think that's like meditating, leading into your Venus and just knowing that like having the like cognitive like strength to be like, yeah, this is not for me, you know? But I know that that's
Mm.
easier said than done.
Yeah,
What about
totally.
you?
Mm.
What about you for intuition and like how did you connect with yours when you were coming into this industry and like not industry but like what you do now?
Like, to be honest, I have gone through a lot of different phases of my career and of what I thought I was interested in or what I thought I really wanted to do. And I feel like I will always be evolving in a certain way. But now I feel so much more clear on like my actual work in the world and what I really want to focus my energy on long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this the other day and how I like somebody who I did coaching with, her name is Lacey Phillips. She has this like manifestation program, and I was always interested in like manifestation and like how things come to be. And just recently, I'm really now understanding like the quantum level of how manifestation actually works because a lot of people talk about it and like they're missing a lot of it. You're missing the point and how to teach it correctly, but that's besides the point. I've always been interested in like how things come to be and how people um, are living a certain life, like how people easily move through life, why some people have challenges, why some people don't. That was always so interesting to me. And something that I have always done, and I was actually trying to figure out when I first did this, was listening to my pings, which pings is a term that Lacey Phillips uses as like an intuitive hit or like a feeling of full excitement in your body. Like your body literally says yes to something, like your heart lifts and your cells literally like feel like they open up to it. That felt sense I have become really familiar with. And I had always, like my whole life, maybe not with certain people or things where I was like learning, still learning, um, but I had always listened to that. And that pull had been so strong. And I do think it might be because I'm a Scorpio sun. But
Yeah.
speaking about career, for example, I have my sun in the 10th house, which is all about career. That's what we look at with career. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think like where my life is oriented towards, like I feel emotion, I feel excitement about something, and like my body like turns towards it. This could be moon too. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I feel so deeply something that feels really exciting, and I just know I need to follow it. And that is intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know why I had always followed it. And I feel like I developed it through also yoga, meditation, and just really sinking into my own body and quieting my thoughts and letting my body like open and lead me in the right
Mm-hmm.
direction of things
Oh
that
wow.
feel good and feel exciting. Um,
Yeah.
and I just think that is everyone has intuition, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be mistaken as anxiety. because you
Yeah.
get a feeling of butterflies. And I've known that. Like, I've known that feeling. It feels exciting, but it's more like butterflies and it's more like a red flag. And
Mm-hmm.
discerning what's that and what's actually my like actual intuition. Um, so reading a birth chart for me is like practice in listening to, and taking action on my intuition. So when I pull up someone's birth chart, I trust, I've built this muscle because it's been a long time because I didn't trust myself before all that imposter syndrome and stuff. But I trust that what I see first is what they need to hear in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what pops out to me, like I look at a chart and I'm like, oh, I just immediately see this Jupiter trine or this Jupiter
Mm-hmm.
trine Saturn thing. Um, and I trust that that is what they need to hear in that moment. And it most always, all the time is, which is cool.
Wow. Yeah. And there's something about the anxiety thing that I feel like is really hard for people. Like, obviously, it's hard for everyone at the beginning because you're like, well, could be either one. Couldn't even tell you which one it is right now. But I feel like with anxiety, if you sit for a minute, obviously, either way, like, if you think it's like really your intuition or you think it's like your anxiety, either way, like, the way that I would sit or deal with it is like sit with it for a minute. And if you feel that the root of it is coming from something that's like inauthentic, or like you're asking the whys, like you're just keep asking yourself why to get like really deep into it, and then it becomes something that's like not authentic to you, I think that's when it's anxiety. Or if it's like, obviously, the obvious thing is when it's like externally rooted, that's usually anxiety because it's like the comparing or the fear or the like the doubt, you know?
Mm,
But it's hard to determine, especially if you're in a mode of like you can't give yourself that moment to figure it out. But yeah,
yeah.
intuition is huge, and I think with you and I right now, especially like we are like really tapping into the intuitive piece because it is what is carrying us, you know, in a
Hmm.
way,
Yeah.
like carrying it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes it can be rooted in fear, the anxiety. Yeah. Like you said, fear is big and it'll come up again and again. And I've had to like tell myself, okay, is this rooted in fear? Is this decision rooted in fear? Because that's not how I want to live my life. And I know if I continue to say no to whatever fear is telling me to do, then I will be living aligned and I will be enjoying my life so much and it'll be so fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we are on the cusp. We're like just, well, it's just taken a long time. Like that's, I just feel like
It
people
really
don't talk
has.
about, I feel like people don't talk about the time it takes to get from A to B. Like, I just feel like people don't talk about that enough. Like, the kind of thing that you and I do, like yoga and being a coach and like I'm a photographer and I just went part-time doing photography, so it's like a very very like kind of risky time. Like it's just one of those things, but it took me like pretty much since 2019 to like really do this. So it's like it's not going to be quick, and I feel like that's the thing that most people are like, well, okay, how do we do this
Mm.
then? And it's just like, for me at least, it took a while. Obviously, it could take less time for anyone, but it
It's
takes,
taken me so long to decide and to like get
yeah,
clear on what my aligned work looks like in the world. Because
yeah,
yeah, some things you continue with some things and then eventually you're like, this is burning me out. And it's because I don't actually like it doesn't really actually speak to me in the way it did before.
yeah,
And it's a constant like I feel like I'm constantly trying to get more clear on what that
yeah.
is. And it really does happen when you let go of that trying and just
Hmm.
allow.
And allow it to also shapeshift because it will. And like I used to beat myself up for that and just be like, well, this wasn't the original like idea and now it's all different and like people like what are people gonna say? It's like it doesn't like it that's how it has to be because you are growing. your projects and your business has to grow with you. So nothing is ever going to be the same. And there should always be a sense of flow, like you said, in what you do. But I think the main thing is like to do it. Like do it. Because doing it is the hardest part, but when you take the action, it will like induce motivation into more action, and then
Mm.
you'll continue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Um, cool. Okay, so let's talk about career and relationships and how to look at those things in your birth chart.
Yes. Do you want to
Cool.
start?
What would you look at? Um, yeah, sure. I'll start.
And why don't, yeah,
So
let's say kind of like the main things all together, and then we can go into them specifically.
yeah. So for career, if you're looking to gain insight on your specific career path, your most exalted and aligned career according to your birth chart. First, look at the 10th house or Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn, if you have any planets there. Then look at your MC, which is the midheaven, your Dharma point, the top of the sky in your chart. And then Mars and Venus, which is all about how you take action and how you receive relationships as well and values. And the moon. The moon is how you feel day to day. It's changing all the time. And it really has to do with your body too. So letting your body be fully involved in what you do. Um, what would you look at?
Yeah. So like you just said, like all of those and pretty much in that order is exactly how I would do it. What you said about the moon is so accurate and is also so much tied to your security, and I think I just get driven, like that's what catches my eye first when you ask like what would I look at first, because the moon for me, obviously I'm ruled by Cancer. I have a Cancer sun and moon, so it's just like very much like I am very much driven by the security that I feel. So I think I probably touched on this in the last episode, but I was always hindering between what would make me the most secure and what would make me the most fulfilled. Right? So, but those are both like moon matters, like fulfillment, like what you feel and how you feel satisfied and like that kind of thing. The moon, and then your security, money, like how money comes in and out and like how it makes you feel secure, like what do you like the foundational things, which I think is definitely a Cancer Capricorn axis theme, by the way.
Mm,
But it's like I just I was oh obviously not obviously I was just always hindering on that thing, and I feel like that is what makes the most like instantaneous change when you look to your moon. Like when you look to your moon, it shows you how probably how you're feeling currently. Because if you look at your like transiting, if you're looking at the transits, it's like okay, the moon right now is opposite my natal moon, so like maybe feeling a little bit of this like energy of just like polarity, right? But it also just gives way, your natal moon gives way to this sense of security. And if you're anything like me, that's very important with career. But
hmm
MC and 10th house, like that, to me, when I look at like, it's just so funny when I look at like celebrity charts and I see that there's like always something weird on their MC or their ascendant. Like there's like a planet that's like either a benefic or just like the moon or the sun. Like it's just it's so telling. These areas are so telling, like the ascendant and MC, about like the life, the legacy, the thing that like you do in this life that you are remembered by, which I feel like a lot of the time is career. So those two are probably the biggest ones that stand out. And then like of course Capricorn and Saturn, it's just like it's the structure, it's the foundation. It's like okay, this is like how you build, this is how you build. And yeah, I'm trying to like I also want to know kind of what for you, like where are these things in your chart and how do you relate them to how you've seen your career play out.
Yeah. Great question. So, how I interpret my chart, I have in my 10th house, I have my sun in Scorpio.
Yeah,
The way I
that's so
relate
big.
to the outer world is through depth, connection with others. You're laughing. She's laughing
It's
because
so
it's so
accurate.
fucking true.
It's
The
so
way I
true.
relate to others is through and through, without a doubt, depth and the transformative process of like life, death, rebirth of
Through
Scorpio.
effing death. Depth. Death and depth.
Death and depth, Scorpio.
Scorpio.
Um, yeah, and then my Capricorn, I have a big Capricorn Cancer axis, big houses there. In Capricorn, I have a Uranus and Neptune conjunct in my first house.
Me too,
So,
in my third.
yeah, that's a generational thing. So, those are outer planets, but like the way that I revolutionize my approach to things, Uranus, and the way I connect to spirituality, Neptune, all in Capricorn, an earth sign, all about building structures and building sustainable career over time. House of Saturn, Capricorn, right?
Mm.
So those planets there really speak to just the invention of a career for myself where I can connect to spirit and that builds a solid foundation where I can self-actualize for me. And that is how I see my Capricorn. I have a Capricorn rising. So I am myself, I am a Capricorn rising. So I'm ruled by Saturn. Saturn is structure and it's limitation and it's money. Saturn does have to do with money too. It's like building the structures around money. Saturn can be really limiting, but Saturn for me, I have a really strong Saturn because I have my sun in my 10th house square to Saturn for me in my second house, which is about money.
Mm.
So there's a big tension there and a challenge that I can overcome that I have been really overcoming lately in my life where the way I express myself in the world, my emotional nature is very much coming up against the way I make money. And I'm like, okay, how can I make money and not be overly emotional and like spilling out my heart? Because that's what my Scorpio wants to do. How can I pull back and use that square energy to like create the structure for me to have something that's really sustainable, where I can also just share my heart in a way that feels boundaried, Saturn.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And
So let me
I'm
just
also okay, go ahead.
let me just recap. So for me, prominent things in my chart that I look to when I'm thinking and about my career, my next steps, is my Saturn, my Sun, my 10th house, the Capricorn Cancer axis, and the second house because finances and money. So that's what I look at in my chart. And also what we spoke about, Mars and Venus.
Hmm.
Um, my Mars is in the seventh house in Cancer. My Venus is in the 12th house, conjunct my moon. So it's very much connected to how I feel and my values. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And the fixed energy of Scorpio and Aquarius with that aspect, I think there's something about cardinal and mutable energies that are like kind of changeable. Like they're like both concerned with change. And yeah, there's something about the fixed signs that I always, not that like I'm just like, oh no, it's tough, but like I just sometimes feel like there's not a stubbornness, but there's something there that can be a little bit like, I no, like just like, no, I just want to do it this way, and or just like want to keep it equilibrium or something like that. So I feel like that's really interesting, and that makes sense that you look to the Capricorn Cancer axis for that.
Mm. Um, yeah. So for a career, where do you see, like, what important planets do you see in your chart when you think about your career?
Yeah. Um, So there is something I got one of those weird astrology insights this morning looking at my chart, like an insight that I never saw before, and I was just like, whoa. But I would say, like, to answer your question, the first thing is probably Mars and Venus in my chart specifically. And Venus I'll talk about later, but basically what I realized is that Mars there I think I've already kind of extrapolated on this in this episode, but like the doingness of everything for me has always been like the struggle. Like there's just like this like it's just like doing something is always like harder for me, like just taking action. Like I feel like I'm very heady, which gives way to like my Gemini everything, Gemini Cancer axis or cusp everything. I'm just like very like into the mind and very like strategic and quick and all of that. But like, so I could like do a million things in my head. I could do a million things in my head, but I just like somehow can't like embody it. And I realized today that like my Mars Virgo is like not trine. I forget what it was, but there's an aspect between my Gemini placements with my Mars and Virgo, and because Gemini is at the end, I forget how it is, but I also have Chiron right next to my Mars, which is the wounded healer. So it's just like there's that thing that's like painful for me to like just like oh like take action, but Mars being in my 11th house, which is the house of Aquarius, I think really is telling, not only because I'm highly organized and I'm like highly structured and I like have all these systems in place, which is like file cabinet energy with doingness, right? Taking
Yeah.
action. But it's in the house of Aquarius, which is all about networking, internet, like, and I just wrote down like wellness and humanity because it really is like Aquarius is concerned with humanity and therefore we care. It's like the human aspect of the chart. When you look at your chart, it's like Aquarius is like what cares the most about humans overall. But on a level where that I am, Mars being very like individualistic. It's funny because I work in wellness in the wellness industry and I do all my work online. So I was just like, "Whoa, this is like really accurate to what I actually do." Do being like the word that I'm emphasizing here. So I encourage people to like don't gloss over Mars so much in terms of career as much as it's very much like warrior energy and like I guess like whatever how you would physically assert yourself, but it's also very much that for me. So that was just a cool insight that I got this morning. And yeah, like my there's just a lot with career and money. There's just these themes of money in my chart. Like my moon is in the eighth house. So eighth house is all about contracts and like loans or just owed things that are owed and things like that. So there's a big there's something here that I haven't fully experienced in my life yet. So like eighth house matters. Haven't fully experienced like all that I think I will in this life yet with that, but the moon is in that house, so it's very much like the money contractual things go hand in hand, and then Mars. And yeah, the MC is still kind of weird to me. Like I have a Leo MC and I just like I still don't really, not that I don't see it, but yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit like perplexed by it.
Mm,
I wonder
that's
how it will
interesting.
show up. Yeah.
I feel like you show up in a like a proud way. And that's the
Hmm.
Leo MC, like showing up as like bold.
Yeah.
It's just, it's like simple as that.
I
So
like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So people like figuring out like what do I do with my career? How do I figure out what to do next? I would say for
Mm.
aligned careers specifically, connect with your intuition first. Don't look at your birth chart to like for answers necessarily. Um, so connect with your intuition. Move your body,
Yes.
like try meditation, certain practices that quiet the mind and where you can feel into the body's yes specifically. And then listen to those, follow those things consistently. And when you do so, you'll be able to, like, in your process, look at your birth chart and look at it through the lens of what I'm struggling with right now. Like, whatever specific nuanced thing that you are looking for, like, a little bit of clarity on, look at your planets in your birth chart and just get to know the energy of, say, your sun or of, say, your 10th house. So, say you have like an Aries 10th house, get to know that energy, which is like Aries is like so sparky and it's like the first energy of the zodiac. So, like, it's fire and it's like initiatory. So, if you have an Aries 10th house, you're meant to start something, you're meant to
Mm-hmm.
begin something, or you're meant to be really active in your career.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go over all of the other signs in another episode,
Mm-hmm.
because that would be really helpful. But that would be my advice.
Yeah. I I would say that's a really cool way to look at it, especially because now I'm
Hmm.
thinking like Leo ruling my 10th house. Like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean also something maybe bold? You know, like
Hmm.
something is meant to be bold here. Like, so
Yeah,
yeah, I really like that
great.
advice.
So let's talk about last thing. Let's talk about relationships and what to look for in your chart when it comes to relationships. So
Yes.
whatever issue you're struggling with, what would you look at first, or just to get to know yourself in relationships better?
Yeah, yeah. So my first two planets, and I'm sure it's obvious, but Venus, and Mercury. So Venus, the reason why I would look at Venus, because basically what I wrote down is it's your style in relationships. It's what you're attracted to, it's what you find beautiful, it's how you come together with somebody, and it's like the flavor. So like it's just like that thing that you hold, but also that is like the mirror to what you attract in your life, which I find very, it's like that's very Libra to say, you know, like it's like the thing that you find the most beautiful, so therefore you have it here and it's just like yours, right? So that's Venus to me. For me, that's Gemini 8th house. My Mercury is also Gemini 8th house. So with Mercury, this is obviously how you communicate your needs, wants, desires, and how you just generally communicate. So I find that obviously so important because it's like your capacity to express yourself is how I would see Mercury in relationships. It can also dictate like I would, if like if you wanted to know kind of synastry esque stuff, I would look to like your partner's Mercury and your Mercury and like make something there maybe first so that you can just see how you guys communicate together. So from there, then I would kind of look at Mars and be like, okay, how do we take action together? Like, how do you show your love? How do you move? Obviously, this is also ruled by like sex and how you assert yourself, your willingness, your physical expression of love. It's basically literally all of this plus your sun. So, like, I would say priority is all these, then your sun sign. Then look at sun and see, like, okay, with all of this being accounted for, this is how this is how I identify and like my vitality and like how I express myself, not so much how I express myself to you, but how I express myself in my eyes, which I think is still important. As much as people are like, oh, so much more to your sun sign than, or so much more to astrology than your sun sign, I still think it's important in relationships too. And then, very last thing, I would look to the Libra Aries axis because this axis deals with the self, Aries, and the other, Libra. It is the times of year where it's like the rebirth moment of Aries, and then the time of year, the equinoxes, right? Libra season is when we start to descend and like go. I just see things as like seasonal symbolism, and Libra is like the start of like the outwardness. Aries is the start of the inward, like personality development, right? So this can show you how and where you exude your own self will and expression. How you do so with others as well is Libra. What signs rule the houses that Libra and Aries fall within are also going to give a lot of insight here. Mine are 12th and 6th house. So, yeah, I'm still like trying to interpret that, but that's kind of how I would interpret relationships and what I would look to first.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, a little recap on relationships in your life and in your birth chart. Venus and Mars, the Libra Aries axis, Mercury, and the Sun. Super important. I would agree with all those.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and in terms of like long-term relationships, I think looking at your both of your north nodes together is a really great way to figure out or connect with what you take action on a daily basis toward your evolvement or your awakening. So like how you
Yeah.
both connect to like spirit and find this like fulfillment in life spiritually.
Yeah.
I think that's important for like long-term relationships.
That's really
So,
interesting.
yeah. So don't ignore those pings from the universe. Trust your intuition. And next next episode will be like full-fledged Cancer season. Liz's sun solar return is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it'll be a little celebration, and maybe we'll talk about uh, like the 10th house through the signs, so we can get really deep into like what careers can look like for people.
Yeah.
Um, cool.
I love that. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope this helped you kind of get more get more insight on how birth charts can help you with career,
Hmm.
relationships, experiences. And yeah, we will
Yeah.
be back next week or 2 weeks.
Well, see you next time.
Bye.